As a media producer proceeds through various video projects, lights must be set up on different sets, in different positions and configurations. The variety of lighting tasks and configurations and set designs can be a bit confusing to someone who has not lit things before, and as such, sometimes error can show up on the recording. If a media producer does get the lighting configuration right, does this mean that the subtle aspects to the light are also correct? This is the problem, that sometimes we overlook the nuances simply because there are too many details to address, and we may not even be aware of all the details that need to be addressed. One of the nuances, which can be overlooked, has to do with the quality of the light. Unless someone teaches you that there is such a thing as quality of light, you would probably not think about that issue on your own. On set, light is often described as hard or soft. This is subjective assessment, which requires that one observe the light. So what is hard light and what is soft light? Let's discuss hard light quality. If a light source is small, and if there is no diffusion between the light and the actor, and it is intense like a single spotlight beam, then the light will have more contrast and it will be considered to be hard. In regards to soft light quality, if a light source is of a larger area and there is diffusion between the light and the actor and it is bounced, and the light will have a lower contrast and it will be considered soft. Another thing you may need to do is to use reflectors. A long time ago, when I began to learn video production by working with colleagues on different types of videos, we learned the camera quickly enough, but the lighting took longer to master. One of the very first things we learned was that we needed some sort of lighting solution to expose images properly. This was especially true with the video cameras at the time that had small image sensors and a very poor sensitivity to low light. Work lights were the saviors. But no matter how cool the images looked when we shot indoors, in a controlled environment, the outdoors sometimes presented challenges. Outdoor shooting was unpredictable, as the sun and cloud combinations seemed to control whether or not we would get good footage. And at nighttime, the grain on the early camcorders was disastrous. During the daylight, we learned that our small lights, even if powered by a generator, many times could not compete with the sun. This may not be immediately obvious to a newbie, but it takes a lot of light to be able to bring up the level enough to work during bright daylight. Most studio light kits are just not that powerful. A much easier solution is to just bring a couple of inexpensive and very lightweight foil reflectors and bounce cards. By bouncing light from the sun with a reflector or a bounce card, or blocking light from the sun, or even diffusing the light, it becomes possible to light a scene professionally but without using lights. This is very advantageous, as using a generator outside to power lights will most likely destroy your audio soundtrack, disturb others in the nearby vicinity, and make it difficult to produce, as it involves many cables and lugging around a hefty generator and light package. Reflectors can produce light of various qualities. For example, they have different surfaces, some with gold, silver, or white covers. The metallic gold or silver will reflect a harsher, more focused light, whereas a matte white surface will reflect a more soft and diffuse light. And on a sunny day, all you need to achieve three-point lighting is a simple white card and a reflector. Golden hour is actually a secret to the success of many photographers. During golden hour, you can place your subject right between you and the camera. The sun will serve as a very strong backlight. To complete the three-point lighting setup, put a white bounce card on one side to act as the fill, and shiny reflector on the other side to act as the key. And when you're working with people that like to use bounce, that is a sign of a true professional. Bouncing is a commonly overlooked practice by those new to lighting, and it has to do with bouncing light. Sometimes so much focus goes into just lighting the scene that too much light may be thrown onto the subject. The intensity needs to be controlled, and the best way to do this is to dim the light, or take the light further back from the subject, or simply bounce the light with a white card. The last solution can also look very visually pleasing, softer, more diffuse, more flattering, and less artificial. One concept which took me a while to figure out has to do with adding depth. One of the tricks I used to use when building a set or staging a scene for a film shoot was to enhance the three-dimensional aspect of the scene. I would place a table in the scene, some plants, a cabinet drawer, all things that convert an otherwise bland room into a room where it is obvious how deep it is by having object with the reference space and dimension. So why did I do this? Well, have you ever tried filming a wall or a person in front of a wall? This kind of imagery can be kind of boring. The reason behind this is because our eyes, we interpret the world as a dimensional structure that has a width, a height, and a depth. But the television screen just has width and height. It's flat. So the person designing the set, and the cinematographer picking the angle, and the gaffer setting up the lights must all think about how to accentuate the scene for depth. For example, the scene could be broken down into a foreground, a middle ground, and a background area. Different layers of the scene could have a different color, so as to accentuate the layers and give the impression of depth. Depth looks very good on camera. It's comfortable to watch and also showcases your abilities as a video producer. Okay, now let's discuss a bit about shading. Shading, or shooting scenes with some shadows in them, can make the scene look interesting. Oftentimes, inexperienced lighting designers may be afraid of shadows, as they may fear that a misplaced light could cast an unsightly shadow of the subject or another object onto the background. Usually this would not be good, as it would reveal that there is a misplaced production light. The problem is that sometimes inexperienced lighting designers try to remove all shadows from the scene. I've made this mistake before. This can make the scene look lifeless, bland, uninteresting, and flat. The reason I say flat is that when you have a shadow or a darker tone, the human eye actually interprets that as being further than, say, an area which is bright. We determine depth information from shading, which gives the scene a dimensional, real-world feel. So in short, yes, eliminate unsightly shadows that give away that you are lighting a scene, but don't be afraid to create shadows in different areas so as to make interesting textures throughout the scene. Another thing which you use very often are gels. Gels are very useful, especially indoors. Gels allow you to color your scene. With color, you can enhance a dramatic moment or make something look like a work of art. Gels and lighting helps avoid the risk of ending up with a dull, flat, lifeless image. Also, without control over color, the work will not look cinematic. Bring gels of different colors along with you as part of your equipment kit. And we also want to mention a bit about diffusion. Diffusion is usually some sort of fabric that is placed between the subject and the light source. It helps to soften the sharp edge that the digital look often produces. You can cover the lights with diffusion fabric by clipping on a diffusion paper onto the barn doors of the light. And lastly, I want to mention power supply. This course is not an electrical course, but I do want to mention an important electrical concept. If you run too many lights from the same circuit in a room, you can blow the fuse. And if you by any chance you don't have access to the fuse, the shoot is done. It's always best to use a few extension cords so as to run some of the lights off other circuits in other rooms. The goal is to spread your power draw to different rooms to draw current from different circuits, because this way each circuit shares only a portion of the total power requirement.